All right. Hi, everybody. I am Sequoia, and I'm joined today for a conversation with the fantastic and very talented Dr. Jennifer Stebbing. She is the author of a new book, Rehabbing the Last 10%. And let's see, I think the last 10%. And this is all about solutions for patients who have plateaued during physical therapy. So this book is really for physical therapists and people who are trying to help patients uh, basically recover from injury that are stuck getting that complete healed place in their treatments. So, hi Jennifer, how are you, Dr. Stebbing? How are ya?
Thank you, Sequoia. That was great intro.
Um, I love our conversations on the other side of the video camera and being live on YouTube. You and I always get into such great conversations. And you and I were talking earlier today about some really intriguing concepts that I wanted to share with my clients. And the concept of biotensegrity.
Biotech.
Now, I'm going to let you explain what biotensegrity is. Did I pronounce that right?
You did. So biotensegrity is this concept that all our body is held together um, by other by it's not by independent, like we're not supposed to just look at the knee and expect the knee to hold itself together. We have to look at all the tissue that adjoins to the knee or attaches to the knee, and that's part of what maintains the integrity of the knee so that it doesn't degenerate. So when we think of an injury to the knee, we think, oh, there's something that happened, so the biotensegrity has been lost there. And for some reason or another, you have additional extra motion. And the motion, instead of, the knee's supposed to like bend, in this case, the knee may move forward or backward or side to side, and that creates a loss of stability, and that causes wear patterns on the joint. So biotensegrity is really talking about all the structures that are working together to allow for the knee to function perfectly. And so, for example, since we're talking to people that may know more about the anatomy, uh, the medial collateral ligament, for example, it attaches the inside of the knee, the femur, to the inside of the knee, of the tibia. But the fibers there aren't aligned in a straight line. They're actually aligned like this, so that whenever you bend the knee, there's still some structural integrity and some stability to the knee. And that's the concept of biotensegrity. Is it's not just a single structure, but it's the way that the fibers are aligned. And it can happen both from a cellular level, like what holds that cell in place and makes it, adhered to its neighbor, or it allows the fascia to move just gently along itself. There, it's what keeps our structure. It's the structural integrity of our body is held together by this concept of biotensegrity.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, I love this. Okay,
yeah,
so I want to ask you a little bit more about how that actually, to me, sounds like what we need today in our politics, which is everything working together. But I almost feel like you and I were talking about politics earlier today, and biotensegrity is, cooperation. It sounds like with all of the parts, so that functionality is there.
yeah. So what keeps us or keeps our bodies working well is not only what's the fibers, but the hormonal input to the fibers, for example, or the effects of all the micronutrients in our diets have a play in how we make energy. That keeps the not only just calcium and phosphorus and other things like that, but even the role of protein, like in terms of being a building block, and you have to have enough protein in your diet to keep yourself or allow yourself to repair. So I think biotensegrity is really talking about the structural function, but
Mm.
it requires a living um, under source of nutrition to do that, and it requires some stress to the system, like exercise, movement. That also is important for the system as well. So I love the concept. It's very hard to explain in a short period of time. Um, but it does exert, like in the knee, there's a compressional force that's exerted by the MCL and the LCL and all the ligaments and other tendons around it. And this compressional force forces the bones apart. So it's kind of like that Chinese finger toy where you pull it apart, you can't get your fingers out. It's the same concept where this compression to the system is what's needed to hold us together, and that's created by this basket weave of tissue that intertwines around it. It's a circumferential compression that's caused by all these fibers.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Why is it important to understand biointegrity, and how do you talk about this in the book that helps physical therapists, and eventually, really, at the heart of everything, you and I are trying to help our clients and our patients really to deal with the dysfunction of their body. I mean, my book is on ED, and so you and I were talking about how most people have no idea the correlation between their diabetes and what they're putting in their bodies 5 years ago, and how that has caused an erectile dysfunction situation. So help the people who are watching to understand how it ties in.
Yeah, well, like in terms of treatment, I do a number of different injection treatments to help people heal. And the issue with that is that you really have to treat the whole structure, all the little injured areas around I'm just going to keep using the knee as an example, because that
Yeah.
allows the entire structure to heal. When people have an injury or joint degeneration, and you just put a single injection into the joint, and you're like, ta-da! But the joint didn't get injured independent of these structures that support it. So
Mm.
from my standpoint, when I'm treating people and I'm using different types of regenerative injections, I want to make sure that I treat all the structures that are injured around it, with the idea that we are trying to get the whole structure to heal or repair itself.
And so, the biotensegrity in regards to your healing practice is making sure that the physical therapists who are reading your new book are understanding that there's way more to the situation than just, decompartmentalizing the situation, but really focusing on the biotensegrity of the healing of
Well,
that apparatus. Not.
physical therapists, they totally understand this. They may not have that word biotensegrity in their vocabulary at this point in time, but I hope it becomes part of their choice of words. But they already are rehabbing people's knee issues by getting their glutes to function. Now, the glute function,
Mhm.
is really important for how that knee operates, as well as the ankle stability. And so they know this already. And that's the beautiful thing about it. I think sometimes the concept gets lost, in a surgical field or specialty, where you're just looking at an MRI and you're like, oh, that meniscus, that's torn, let's take it out. Well, what happens when we do take that out? That's the question, because it's there for a reason. Um,
Right,
and
right.
so I think that's the part of it is can we get this area to heal rather than take it all apart? And if the meniscus, for example, is not supposed to be a weight bearing structure. So what caused it to be a weight-bearing structure, and some
Mm,
sort of stress caused it to tear.
mm.
And so I'm thinking backwards to what was the original injury. I have to figure that out, and where is that injury? And let's see if we can correct that and have it change the course of where we're going with that. Because if you take out part of a meniscus, the next step is taking out another part of that meniscus. It's like this piecemeal approach, and suddenly someone has to have a knee replacement or a partial knee replacement. And so it's like this, a surgery begets a surgery begets a surgery. And I'm not sure that's the best way to treat somebody. I'm sure that might be an option for people, but I don't want a knee replacement.
Well, I'll have to tell you, I have had a how do you pronounce that?
Meniscectomy.
Meniscectomy? Meniscectomy. Thank you. I did say it right. My experience with all of that. So as an athlete, in high school, my senior year, I blew out my left knee, and it was torn to shreds. And they basically took pieces of my meniscus away. 9 years later, that meniscus basically was just falling apart like crab meat, and again broke apart, locked my knee, and they had to go back in and do a second reconstruction of the ACL and a whole bunch of stuff. And I have to say, like, I now understand that when you cut and you do a meniscectomy, the reality is you've now damaged it, and it will deteriorate more, because that part of the body is not supposed to be going through that kind of surgical procedure. And I at this point in my life wish that I hadn't, because now I like maybe have a fourth of my meniscus. I walk pretty well, I have to say, considering that my left knee is so, deconstructed. um, but I love that you're bringing that into the conversation, because these kinds of things, to the doctors back in when I had this done, it was in the 80s. So when they did this, they were just like, she like injured it. We'll just take it out. We'll just like shave it here, shave it there, and clean it up, is what they said,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But it turned out 9 years later that that cleaning it up actually injured it to make it no longer function properly.
yeah.
So
Yeah, we're learning, everybody's learning these things along the line. I don't think we're nearly as aggressive as about even doing a meniscus surgery as once we were.
mhm.
And so it's, sometimes these things have to be done, but then like, what can we do to help preserve the joint then is the question. So, wherever somebody is in their trajectory of life, you can't undo a surgical decision.
Yeah,
So,
that's
you just have to figure out what to do next. And so a lot of times people choose to do the surgery because they're in so much pain or in dysfunction. And sometimes it's warranted, and sometimes time or different avenues of treatment are out there for people to explore. And I think that the regenerative medicine field is just starting to really open up. More people are getting to know it. And, it wasn't really a choice when I was going through medical school. And now I basically have colleagues all across the country and across the world that are doing it. So,
I
um,
love that. Yeah, you and I are going to geek out about that a lot more,
yeah,
because I've been watching this since the 80s. Like, I'm like, all right, I'm not having that surgery that everybody says wait till the very end. I'm going to regenerate my knee, and so I do everything possible to make sure that my health is on the growing end instead of the degeneration end. And you and I have talked about that kind of stuff
yeah,
before. But I want to just ask you, about your book, because probably the percentage of people who are people who have injuries and possibly need a doctor like you is a higher percentage of the people who are going to see this video versus physical therapists. And I hope that physical therapists actually will see you and read your book, and and I'm wanting to make sure this book gets in those people's hands, because I think it's really important. But for who are saying, I'm also that last 10%. This book might be for a physical therapist, but I want to bring this to my physical therapist. Well, what do you want patients to know who might be looking for a doctor like you? And do you work with people online? COVID right now, people are doing these kinds of, sessions with doctors. So what do you want clients to know?
Yeah, so I have a telemedicine service that I offer, so people can book appointments and that type of thing. And I'm always happy to get on the phone and talk to people, and I can redirect them to people that I know that are in their area too. That's the other thing. Um, Knowing when to treat something surgically or non-surgically is always a big question, and sometimes that can be, you can have that discussion right from the start with the simple get on the phone and talk to people. Um, but I think that there's my hope here is, sure, it can get into the hands of physical therapists, but many of my patients are super educated. They read the studies, they know the studies, and they're like, by the way, have you ever thought about doing this way? And I'm like, yep, I do it that way. And they're like, you do? and so they're reading the studies as they come out, and they're helping, they're so informed. So this book is technical, but for somebody who's interested and wants to know more and understand more, this is, it's not that far um, above anybody who's interested.
Oh no, I actually thought it was very easy to read, very easy to understand, and with all of the things that I've gone through, wellness wise, injury wise, I really thought it was very helpful, and I'm not a doctor, so yeah, no, thank you so much for writing it. What else do you find is a really important aspect of what you're trying to communicate in rehabbing the last 10%?
Well, I think I think it's the fourth chapter in the book really talks about the biotensegrity, and then we talk about the impact of steroids or corticosteroids in terms of they don't help with healing. So that's a general concept that I would love to get everybody off their Advil and Motrin and things like that when they're trying to recover from an injury, because it has been shown, from research to interfere with healing. And so that medication itself those medications are all over the counter: Aleve, Motrin, Advil, ibuprofen. And if we could get people off of that, we could reduce the number of GI bleeds, for example, in the world.
So let's pause for just a second.
Yeah.
You said the term corticosteroids, and then you said things like Advil, Aleve. What else? Advil, Aleve,
Motrin,
Motrin.
yep,
What else?
ibuprofen.
Ibuprofen. Those are cortical
Those are
steroids.
non-steroidal, anti-inflammatory,
They're non. Did you say?
non-steroidal.
Okay, because when you said say the term again.
Corticosteroids.
Corticosteroids.
Yeah.
Now, I think of that as cortisone.
Yes.
And I personally am like completely opposed to anybody who gets close to being prescribed cortisone and like cortisone creams and everything like that. I'm just like, oh, please stay away from that, because it's not going to heal you. It's just suppressing the symptom. And from my homeopathic trainings, I am so in opposition of anything that suppresses symptoms, because it's not addressing the core issue, which is
Right.
generally the work that I'm doing with clients, is taking them off of all the things that is pushing the problem, the illness, or the symptom deeper into the system, which then from the trainings in homeopathy that I've had, it then comes out
In
in
other
sideways in other areas. And then we're wondering, how did I get cancer of the eyeball? And you're like, well, how much cortisone did you have in your system because you had a belly ache? It's like, so talk a little bit about this. I'm so glad you're bringing it up, but I don't think people understand that these things are not helpful to healing because we're told via marketing that if you don't feel well, oh, just take Tylenol PM, and if your foot is swollen, take ibuprofen. Explain what we're talking about here, please.
So, like, I'm okay with Tylenol. I'm okay with low dose aspirin because sometimes the benefits of the low dose aspirin are better than not taking it for some people with cardiovascular disease. It's the non-steroidal inflammatories, we call them NSAIDs, and the corticosteroids, the injectable ones that they put into knees, the steroid injections. Those are the ones that interfere with healing. So we know from studies that if we inject corticosteroids into the joint actually deteriorates faster. So here you are like, oh, my knee hurts, and I want to avoid surgery. Is there anything you can do for me? Um, Putting a corticosteroid in there may have an effect in terms of reducing pain, but it probably is going to accelerate degeneration. And it may not be it may be the steroid itself, because a lot of them have crystals. And so the crystals stay in the joint for the longer acting the steroid, that they have these crystalline structures, and that kind of precipitates out and causes damage to the cartilage. But it also could be that, oh, I don't have so much pain, I'm going to go and do more activity that's going to be harmful. It's probably a combined effect right there. So your body has a natural way of limiting itself, and animals can't take or don't, in the wild, they don't take steroids. They limp, they figure out how to not weight bear or avoid using the injured area. And sometimes, they can heal from that. But the issue with uh, people taking an ibuprofen right after an acute injury, so you sprain your ankle and you're like, where's the ibuprofen? I'm going to take that right away. Is that healing is done in this regulated fashion. It happens. It's very temporally oriented. So, in the first, 30 minutes or a half hour, um, these things happen. So the platelets migrate to the area, they stop the bleeding, and then they burst open and they release a whole bunch of growth factors and other things that help tell the body what it's going to do later, which is to bring in a new blood supply to help the area heal, and to bring in the blood supply brings in the nutrition. And the eventual goal is to bring in collagen so that you can repair, so that normal tissue is being replaced by the injured area. Um, but all of that, when you take ibuprofen, doesn't happen. So when we think about, oh, that injury that I had when I was 16 and I sprained my ankle and it never really got better, and I took ibuprofen, and that's now causing me to have joint arthritis at age 45. And you're like, yeah, those were choices that were made very, very early on. And it would be great if people used other ways to treat pain. So,
What ways would you recommend?
well, like, I think my kiddo did really well with arnica, you know.
Oh, I love arnica. Oh my
Yeah,
God, totally. I completely agree. Homeopathy has so many people have no idea what homeopathy really is,
yeah.
but arnica, yeah, it's fantastic. It's magic, truly, truly. It's interesting. You're talking about this, and I'm remembering, like, so I have an aversion to painkillers and ibuprofen and stuff like that, because at the age of 17 I blew out my knee and had this experience. And as an athlete, and I love that you're a doctor of sports medicine, because you and I could talk all day long about so many different things. But I was, let's see, what age was I was I think it must have been uh maybe I was 17, could have been 16. I had blown my shoulder. I had dislocated my shoulder in a soccer game, and I was the head cross country runner for our high school, and it was the championship runoff, and I was out because I couldn't use this arm. I literally was like, I had dislocated the shoulder. It was wrapped to my side. And I told my coach, I'm like, I can't run. I can't do this. And he had in his hand 2 horse pill size ibuprofen. Now this is back in 1986, I guess. And he goes, here, just take these. And I popped them in my mouth. I had never really taken that kind of thing before, but they were giant. I was like, whoa. And I started feeling really good. And I came to my coach and I said, strap my arm to my shoulder or strap my arm to my body. I want to run. I ran with my arm strapped to my body. And I literally like came in instead of first or second for the championships. I came in 10th with my arm strapped to me and like not starting the race when everybody else did. And I remember getting like athlete of the week or something like that from my town. And to this day, I remember like I didn't feel any pain at all because I had those 2 horse pills of ibuprofen. But now that you're talking about this, I'm thinking to myself, I'm so glad that I knew that that was like an empty bank account. Like I couldn't continue using that. Luckily, I learned that really early on, because the market of anti-inflammatory and pain meds have gotten so crazy that if I had still been dealing with those kinds of things, I probably would be a vegetable at this point because I was needing that kind of relief so early on. But today, for the last 30 years, I'm now 50. So for the last 30 years, I've been using Arnica.
Yeah, I love those. I have a company called Guna that produces like drops that you can put. They're a mixture of different things.
Yeah.
Um, and it's Italian and they have all sorts of different types of remedies to be used at different times. And so I think that it works just great. And the more, the thing about it is the more, the better your diet is and the cleaner your health is, the better these things work. And so there's this additive effect, like I'm doing everything right and I don't have pain, right? And I think as we get older and our hormones start to drop and, we're more likely to notice some of the injuries that we've had over the period of time, it becomes really, really important to think about what you're putting into your body. So whether it's the types of foods that you choose, or whether it's picking up that ibuprofen every day. I think that there's got to be other ways to do this, and I know there are.
Oh, I love that you're saying that. I mean, I think that's the next conversation we should have is food is medicine, people. Food is medicine. There's so much about what we eat that is correlated to illness, and vice versa, correlated to health. I was kind of geeking around on Facebook before our chat, and one of my cousin's daughters, who's a delight, she just posted a picture of ice cream and said, here's to my diabetes. And I said, wait, are you diabetic? Really? And you tell me that that's not so. And she said, yeah, I am. And I'm like, here, please come talk to cousins, Sequoia, because I do not, you don't have to be diabetic. I mean, diabetic is something that's happening because of your lifestyle choices. And, there's a lot of things that we can do to turn that around. Food as medicine is something that I think most people don't think about because they haven't understood that the nutrients that you're absorbing is essential to your growth and development. And the industry is definitely not helping that out at all. But we need to have a conversation about food as medicine.
Yeah, let's do that. That'd be great.
Awesome.
Yeah, I didn't realize how much food was medicine because that's not taught in medical school. Like the amount of classes that we had on nutrition were handful compared to like the naturopathic doctors, where there's this big emphasis placed on that. And that was one of the things that drew me to the Pacific Northwest, was like, oh, look, they understand food, this is part of their medical model. I
Yes,
love that.
yes. Well, so from the lineages that I've studied and everything, I've studied Weston A. Price. Have you ever studied Weston A. Price's nutrition, everything? Oh my God. So I've been studying his work for about 20 years now and applying that with my clients and everything. And from the perspective of ancestral knowledge and tribal understanding, which I practice different forms of shamanic practices, and it all comes back to nature, right? And if you can get your food as close to nature as possible, that's when it becomes true medicine. And if you talk about medicine in that way, then you're really talking about like living a life that is as close to as designed as Mother Nature intended. And these manufactured lives that we're living right now is at the heart, in my opinion, of what's really concerning about the COVID situation. Frankly, I think the COVID pandemic is a modern society problem, because we've gotten so far away and denatured our entire human existence. But I digress into my esoteric.
Yeah.
Ah,
Well, that COVID was an awesome opportunity for people to reset those things, um, and then when I started seeing, like, people are like done cooking, like, I don't want to cook, and then you see that, they're going out for fast food pizzas or other things like that, and I'm like, oh, because with COVID, people stopped exercising too, with the gyms being closed and everything like that, and I'm like, oh man, that's what's the hard reality of what's been happening more recently, is then you get the what mindset is affected by it, and then you have this dietary thing because we're like done with dealing with it, and then you have like the gyms are closed and I can't go and do my regular routine, like I'm
and then self-medicating with alcohol and
right.
drugs. And now we have, like, the pandemic is an opportunity for us to get back in touch with what's healthy,
Yeah.
and to detox our lives and choose wellness. But what happens is so many people want a quick fix to things and immediate gratification of pleasure. And of course, pleasure is the world that I work in. But you don't have to just have sex to have pleasure. You can actually do a wellness practice that makes you feel good, whether you have a partner to have sex with or not. I mean, you could actually choose to have a meditation that makes you feel better and that increases your wellness and your immune system. You could choose that instead of, I'm just going to get a drink of alcohol. I'm just going to, I mean, I've seen like the increase in, opioids, the increase of cocaine, all of these drug induced, self-medication is really in my practice. I talk about a downward spiral is a degeneration of something. So downward spiral of a relationship or downward spiral of your well-being is degeneration or decomposition of your living organism.
Right.
So I think that that's a huge problem.
Well, I think also, and I struggle with this too, is just like that happiness from within. Like, how do you look to yourself to give yourself your own joy? You know, and I think that's where that gratitude practice comes into play, and other things where you're not looking outwardly for some sort of external stimulus to find pleasure or find happiness or find joy. Um, and
Or
I think,
healing,
right,
because
right,
our bodies are meant to be able to heal themselves.
right.
Our souls are meant to to heal themselves as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that probably the social isolation has a lot to do with this sense of like, I need something. And I think that's the bigger discussion here, is how long can this keep going on, you know? Um, and can we do something different? Can we look at this problem in a different way? And I have lots of other things to say about that, but not in my book. Uh,
All right. Well, let's have another discussion. Well, I'm sure we'll have another one really soon. Thank you for this chat. Thank you for your brilliance as a doctor. Thank you for healing people and giving people hope that there is a natural desire for. Well, I'm getting all teary. Natural desire for for the body to be well and be healed. Because I think that so often with Western medicine, traditional allopathic Western medicine, um, uh, doctor experiences, we, feel like the only thing that you can do is, take this pharmaceutical, which to me, pharmaceuticals are simply toxins with side effects. Some of them seem okay, and some of them, as the 15-second, you could die from this if you take it, it tells us.
yeah, I think
So thank you.
physicians that are out there that are looking, that have been burnt out by the system. I had to see, 20 people a day in order to meet what was required for a salary. And
Mm.
and what I was finding was, seeing patients that quickly, I wasn't able to solve any of their problems. And, that's why the pharmaceuticals industry is a quick fix, here, take this pill, here, take this pill. Like, but it takes a relationship to have with your patients to truly understand what the problems are. And it doesn't, the pain in your back may not be just a pain in your back. It may be something that's happened in the past. It may be where it's manifesting. But unless you get to know the person that way, you won't know how to treat them. And so I know you know that.
I absolutely do. And I'm so glad to have you as a colleague, as a friend. I actually have someone that I'm thinking of right now, that I, after our conversation, need to send to you, because he's had back surgery after back surgery, hip surgery, and they keep injecting with these steroids to take away the pain, but it's just degenerating everything, and I want him well. So look forward to that. Thank you again. I know that we're going to have more conversations soon. And as always, you are a plethora of health information and passion for what you do. So thank you again.
Thank you. Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you, Sequoia.
You're welcome. All right. All right, everybody. In the comments, I have put a link to Dr. Stebbing. Her website is really great. As a matter of fact, let me actually show it to you so that you can see for yourself how to get a hold of Dr. Stebbing. Her website is drstebbing.com. And you can book online with her right there. She does her appointments over the phone if you are not in her area, and then of course in person. She's magical. She's literally worked on my body and have not had issues with the situation that she worked on since, and that was over a year and a half ago. She's super intuitive. Her hands literally know what is going on with you. So I highly recommend getting a hold of her, depending on what you're dealing with, because she is fantastic. So again, look below for the information about her and her book. Rehabbing the Last 10% is available on Amazon, but contact her directly. She's fantastic. All right.
Sequoia.
You're welcome.